Hi everyone, I'm Alia and welcome back to another episode of Aligning Authenticity where we discuss all things mental health. In today's episode, we're going to discuss a little bit about resilience. So, what is resilience? What makes up resilience? And we're going to discuss a few of the myths that come with resilience. In the previous episode was where we discussed about managing stress. And so, how is resilience really different from managing stress? Resilience is more about the overall ability to keep bouncing back from certain setbacks or adversities that we might be facing for the long term. So, compared to stress management, which might involve you doing certain approaches like having some breathing techniques and resilience refers to how you can actually build long-term habits for the long run. When it comes to resilience, there are quite a few myths that come up, and today we're going to discuss 3 myths. The first myth is that resilience is actually just limited to a few people. That means not everyone is able to be resilient. You're born with resilience or not, and that is a myth, okay? Because you can build resilience over the long term, and it is a skill that you can develop and strengthen over time through the different experiences or things that we're having in place. And then the second myth is that resilient people don't feel negative emotions, that they are maybe always kind of seen as positive all the time. They're able to always be optimistic. They may never feel sadness or anxiety, but in truth, people who are highly resilient, they do still feel these different emotions. They do sometimes also feel overwhelmed. And so resilience is not about you being positive all the time. It's more about being able to actually experience these different emotions, but learning how to really cope with them so that you're able to take more empowered action from it. So as an example, in a lot of the therapy sessions that I do, I find that clients that I work with, it's not to say that they don't feel these emotions at the start. Some of them have been through quite a lot of different, very difficult events, okay, and yet they are still resilient. Most of the time, people are much more resilient than they often give themselves credit for. I had this one client who was going through a lot of very difficult situations. So whether it was in terms of his work, and then he had his cat that died, and his girlfriend left him. It was quite a few things that were happening at that same time. And people around him were very concerned because they were like looking at him and they're like, okay, so we're not too sure whether he's really expressing some of these things emotionally. When it came to our sessions, I was kind of expecting someone who was like, very tuned out in that sense emotionally, like he could or possibly even be in denial about these different things that he was going through, but he did show quite a bit of sadness. And it was very interesting that as we were discussing these different things, and he was walking me through all of these different experiences that he was going through at the same time, and I asked him, how are you actually coping with all of this? Or what is actually keeping you going in that sense, because he also mentioned how he felt this sense of everything being quite lost. He was not sure as to whether things can improve in the long run or so, which is a very understandable feeling to have at that moment, right? Because life is so challenging in that space of time. What was his value and his sense of purpose was because he has this younger sister that he's actually taking care of, and he has a very supportive father that's helping him go through all of this. And those were some of the cornerstones that were also helping him get through. But again, it wasn't where he was completely positive about all of these things, and he was not in denial about what he was going through. He was still feeling all those that sadness or the feeling of overwhelm, and that is completely normal. So just to put it out there that just because you might be feeling a certain sadness or anxiety, it does not make you any less resilient than someone else. In social media, we often see the highlight reels. We don't really see all the time that, hey, these people who are actually going through all of these things, these people that we are viewing as very hardy or resilient, that they too have some of these challenges and struggles. In the end, it's about those different coping mechanisms or certain systems that we're having in place to help us get through. Which brings me to the third myth, and it's kind of related to the first one. There are people out there who feel that resilience means that I need to face these challenges alone. Okay, that means that you have to handle everything by yourself. I can definitely relate to that because when I was going through my own personal situation, so this was back then during the pandemic, and it was actually a very stressful situation at that time because I was having quite a few different life changes in my own personal life. At that point, I did feel like, oh wow, Alia, you got yourself into this mess, so you have to be the only one to get yourself out of it, And I think that's a very common space that we might sometimes operate from. And we try to take on everything by ourselves. But similar to my client, and even for me, I was very blessed to actually have some close friends and some relatives who reached out and they were keen to offer some support. Whether that was just a phone call during the pandemic or even sending me certain things, right, so that life could go a little bit more smoothly. During that point was when I realized that, okay, we can do it by ourselves, but we don't really have to. And that doesn't make us any weaker or any less resilient as individuals. It's only understandable that sometimes things can be very rough and it's hard for us to actually navigate those things by ourselves. You can see that also in the case of a lot of single moms where they might feel like, oh, I could be a burden to other people, or I don't want to, add on to this situation and make someone else also feel like they owe me something. But as that saying says, every child needs a village to raise. It's the same when you're going through some tough times, that you don't have to do everything all by yourself. Having said that, it's very important for you to be surrounded by people who are supportive of you. So sometimes even that's where we might also feel like we have to do certain things ourselves because maybe the ones who are around us are not able to actually support us in the way that we want. And that might not be because it's something that is intentional. Maybe they just are unable to understand, or maybe they're unable to actually empathize with what we're going through. And that is okay. I found that something that really helped me at that time was to connect with people who were kind of going through similar situations. Some of them who were actually experiencing some of the issues that I was experiencing. It really helped for me to get the different perspectives of, okay, how are you handling it? What are some of the things that you might be doing that could be helpful for me to solve my own problems? Just putting it out there that it doesn't mean that if you're looking out for this information or if you are trying to find these different ways, that it makes you any less smarter or any less resilient. All that information is out there and it's very good for you to capitalize on it. Why not go and find the people who are able to support you and help you through it without that judgment? There are also certain key components when it comes to building resilience. And the first one, which is very, very important, is your level of self-awareness. Okay, meaning that it's good for us to really understand our emotions and what is triggering us. Because sometimes we might tell ourselves like, oh no, it's okay, this thing is not really affecting me a certain way, but deep down that it is. That deep down that something is really an issue. Perhaps you're dealing with a certain family situation or a certain relationship situation and you're telling yourself like, it's not that bad, it's okay, I'm fine, I don't really see any big problems. When you're really identifying that, hey, I'm feeling a certain kind of way about the situation, certain emotions that can pop up with that is where, like sadness, maybe you're feeling anxiety or that sense of overwhelm, possibly even anger, right? First thing that we might try to do is actually tell ourselves that, okay, calm down, you don't really feel this way. But over time, you find that that feeling still keeps popping up. During those points, it's about getting curious and trying to explore, all right, I'm feeling this certain way. Where is this emotion coming from? What is it that has actually triggered me? And the beauty of it is that when you're not judging yourself, you're not being critical of yourself as you're identifying it, you really learn a lot about your triggers. The beauty of learning your triggers is that then you're able to apply whatever can help you in that moment when you're dealing with those triggers. And the second one is being adaptable or being flexible, because we can't really control all of these different things that are happening in our lives, right? Not all the time anyway, because as what we've discussed in the stress episode is that things might just happen and some of it may also be beyond our control. So one of the key components of resilience is about how are we adapting? How are we going with the flow? Maybe being a bit more flexible in the way that we are approaching things. How that can look like is perhaps in your mind, you have a certain idea of how you want a task to be executed. Right? Or maybe you're working on a very big project. And so you know that, all right, this is exactly what I need to do to get to that bigger picture. However, as things go along, tada, it's not going exactly the way you plan, and you might have to pivot in some ways. But you're still able to achieve that big picture of it. So resilience is about that flexibility to kind of go with the flow, to not let that setback overwhelm or that setback really stop you from achieving what you need to achieve. Another key component of resilience is support systems. So really having people who are actually around to help you, social support, or seeking that help if that's needed. Because again, for us to actually be able to solve certain problems or get through certain setbacks, it really helps to get those different perspectives and insights from other people. It really did help me become a bit more creative. Before I decided to go into this journey of entrepreneurship, I found that, when you're talking to people who are in very stable job, they may only be able to provide input to a certain level. The kind of conversations that you're having with people who are in corporate compared to people who are in entrepreneurships would be very different, right? So it's not to say that one is right, one is wrong. It really helped me in that sense to talk to different entrepreneurs to really understand, okay, what are the different struggles that you have been going through or you are going through in this situation. So I know what to look out for when I go into entrepreneurship. It was amazing in terms of helping me really have a bit more of a game plan as to, okay, Alia, one of the things that, for example, you're going to deal with is possibly not such a stable cash flow for a while. I was able to talk to these different entrepreneurs who I'm very blessed to know about how are you dealing with this financial anxiety, because I would foresee that I might be having this financial anxiety at some point. So I would like to know what has helped you as I go through it. And then during certain moments when, you're kind of scared, then you remember these different insights and perspectives and you realize that it's a normal part of the process, you just have to keep going. And the next key component of resilience, problem-solving skills. For you to be able to overcome some of these different challenges, especially for the long run, you will need developing certain strategies to face these challenges. And I find that that's where sometimes we might fall a bit short in this, because more often than not, when we are having to pivot or try something different, we're very focused on all of the ways that things might go wrong. While that is good in terms of helping us survive, it's also important for us to realize that that is just a very natural reaction of the brain, because the brain is wired to help us survive, but it's not necessarily meant to help us really grow and thrive. Let's say in caveman days, it's where the brain is always looking out for what it views as threats. It doesn't really like change in that sense. What can help is also for us to be aware that, okay, the brain is naturally going to be a little bit more negative. It might bring out certain fears, but I would still need to know how to handle certain situations or how to tackle certain challenges for me to actually push forward towards my goals, for me to grow and thrive. With conscious effort over time, that's where you're able to train the brain to view things a bit more pragmatically, a bit more practically rather than just negative. Even though some of these experiences are very challenging, but through these different experiences, that's where we build up this problem-solving skills. You went through a certain challenging job situation. You had to deal with someone who was particularly unpleasant. And throughout that process, of course, it was very uncomfortable and you probably didn't enjoy it at all. But over time, you learn that, okay, I need to switch my communication in a different approach. I need to provide a bit more info, or maybe I just need to avoid this person altogether. Whatever that is, whatever steps that you had taken, that is where you were practicing problem-solving skills. Using those skills, then the next time that you're actually facing someone who is also incredibly difficult to work with, you're not starting back from the baseline. You've practiced some of the skills already in terms of how to handle the certain situation. And your brain is also then wired to be like, hey, you've dealt with someone like this before. So you have a higher chance of success in terms of handling this difficult character. So I find it very helpful for us to actually remind ourselves, remind our brain that, we are able to get through this. We have the resources, the capacity. So we are actually able to focus less on the possibility of failure and explore more of the magic of possibilities. It's what I tell my participants in workshops or so is that if we're going to be negative about a lot of things, we should also try to see certain areas as to which we are also positive, right? Because as much as things can go wrong, there's also the possibility that things can go better than what you expected. And to me, that's not being delusional, that is just being practical, because you find that even when you're reflecting back on past challenging experiences that you have been through, there was some value in going through it. It probably taught you certain things. And that is okay. Hidden benefits of actually building resilience. One of the strategies that can help in building resilience is reflecting on these past experiences, because from there, the learning or adopting that growth mindset allows us to actually really embrace certain failures as learning opportunities and know that, okay, so from that experience, I learned ABC. So I can apply ABC in this different situation that I'm in. Another strategy for building personal resilience is to set realistic goals. So we don't want to tackle everything all at once, but we do want to kind of keep it consistent and let it slowly build up. So setting, I would say, certain sub goals before you're getting more to the main goal, and it helps for us to take the wins wherever they are. Maybe you want to work out and you are telling yourself that you want to drop a certain number of kgs by the end of the year. So it's really about building some of the small steps, as in, okay, maybe the first goal that you might want to put there is, I will exercise 3 times a week, or I will eat healthy for the weekdays. And then you can slowly build up, and all of these different sub goals that you're setting and that you're hitting, it helps you stay motivated, and you're actually able to achieve that bigger goal in the long run. Building the habits or making certain switches of behavior, maybe you have to pivot certain behaviors as you're going along. That all contributes to the bigger picture, and that all also contributes to the work that you're putting in building your own resilience. It's very important for us to actually take care of our physical and mental health, because these are the things that help contribute to our ability to perform and increase our resilience. Let's say you're tired, let's say you're exhausted, you've not really been feeding yourself right, then your brain is also not able to perform at the level that it needs to actually solve certain problems, and it's harder for you to maintain the momentum of what you're trying to achieve in the long run. When it comes to self-care, often times that we really need to do it are also the times that we don't really feel like doing it. Recognize that this does come up. It requires our own active effort and a certain mindfulness, that consciousness, to remind our brain that, look, we have worked this much, now we can take a rest, okay? Because you're aiming more for the long game, not just the short. In summary, remember that there are different myths out there about resilience which may not necessarily be true. There are also key components of resilience, such as self-awareness, adaptability, and having the support systems that we've talked about, and that we can always build our resilience through the different strategies, such as reflecting on past experiences, cultivating more of a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset, and also really taking care of ourselves, in the mindfulness and even self-care. I hope this content has helped. Thank you guys for tuning in, and see you in the next one. If you enjoyed this episode, or maybe you have certain strategies that have helped you in building resilience, maybe you also have certain stories to share, do feel free to leave a comment, subscribe, and like.